This is KGW News at noon.
The man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students was back in court this morning. Hello, I'm Christine Pitawanich. Thanks for joining us for this news at noon. Bryan Kohberger was in Latah County Court at 8 a.m. and now we're learning new details about the time leading up to his arrest. NBC's Stephanie Gosk reports from Moscow, Idaho.
Bryan Kohberger appeared in court today for the second time here in Idaho. He was asked by the judge if he wanted a preliminary hearing, and he has opted for that, but he and his attorneys don't want a speedy one. They want it to happen 6 months from now in June. A new court date has been set for June 26th. A preliminary hearing is something like a dry run for the trial. He had a right to a speedy preliminary hearing, which needed to happen by law within 14 days. He waived that right, his attorney saying they needed time to prepare. He faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary, and we don't yet have a plea in the case, but an attorney for him in Pennsylvania said he expects to be exonerated. We also have new details about the investigation from a source familiar with the investigation that says that Kohberger wasn't actually considered a suspect until December 23rd, and that information came from forensic genealogy, and that led them to the family and then eventually to Kohberger himself. The affidavit that was released made it appear as if he had been a suspect for weeks. It turns out he had not. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Moscow, Idaho.
Now to some big national news coming out today. Attorney General Merrick Garland has appointed a special counsel to investigate classified documents found at President Biden's home and office. These documents are from Biden's time as vice president. Garland made the announcement this morning. He's appointing Robert Hur to serve as special counsel. Hur was the U.S. attorney for Maryland during the Trump administration. Garland also laid out a timeline for when the investigation started. So there's a lot to unpack here. So stay with me. On November 4th, the National Archives Inspector General notified the DOJ that classified documents were found at an office President Biden used while in Washington, D.C. On November 9th, just one day after the election, the FBI started an investigation to determine if classified documents were mishandled. 5 days later, Garland assigned a U.S. attorney to help determine if a special counsel was necessary. Over a month later, on December 20th, Biden's lawyers told the DOJ that additional documents were found in the garage of President Biden's home in Delaware. Then, a week ago, the U.S. attorney recommended a special counsel to Garland. Earlier this morning, Biden's lawyers again reached out to the DOJ, saying they found another classified document at Biden's home in Delaware. The president told reporters today that he'll fully cooperate with the DOJ. He also explained that the documents were in a locked garage.
People, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
So
but anyway,
was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night.
NBC News is also reporting that federal law officers have already interviewed multiple aides who worked with Biden in the Obama administration. Back locally, one of the 3 18-year-olds accused of arsons around Mount Tabor in southeast Portland appeared in court today. Samuel Perkins was in court at 9:45 this morning for an arraignment hearing. It was an in-person meeting, and Perkins stood right under the camera, so you can barely see the back of his head in the corner. During the hearing, Perkins was allowed to leave without bond, but has to follow judges' rules. For instance, he can't go within 150 feet of any Portland park, possess anything that can start a fire, or contact any of his co-defendants. Perkins, Malik Harris, and Wayne Chen are all accused of setting dozens of fires last summer. Last month, a grand jury examined evidence leading to 14 new charges, including arson, reckless burning, and possession of a destructive device.
You're going to shoot up children, you're definitely a dangerous man, and you have no business being on the streets.
At this hour, police are still searching for a man accused of firing almost 24 bullets through an apartment on East Burnside Tuesday night. An 11-year-old girl and her uncle inside that apartment were hurt. Both are out of the hospital and recovering at home today. The uncle tells us 36-year-old Rashad Calbert knocked on the door, then opened fire when he couldn't get in. Court records show Calbert was arrested on domestic violence charges back in November. He is accused of hitting the 11-year-old's mom with a baseball bat, but the charges against him were dismissed. We spoke with the uncle who was shot in the hand. He didn't want to show his face because he was worried about his safety, but he spoke with us, hoping it helps police catch Calbert.
She was freaking out because she'd been hit, and she's like, it burns. She's like, call the cops, and I was trying to call the cops, and I couldn't function or use my hand, so she ended up having to call the police.
Portland police are asking anyone with information to give them a call. Okay, time now to check in with Rod, who's in the Weather Center. And earlier today, Rod, you described to me some conditions that are, quote, drippy out
drippy.
there.
A little drippy out there. Certainly not stormy. In fact, even though most hours have reported some rainfall this morning out at the airport, most areas are just barely over a trace since the sun came up. So the light color you see, the green color on the radar, that is mostly light rain. There are some breaks. I don't see a lot of change as we go through the afternoon. A reminder, this is rain up over the Cascades as well, where snow levels are now above 6,000 feet. Notice how the parking lot, that's Mother Nature melting that, not any chemicals or anything. So they're at 36 degrees up at the lodge right now. We've seen temperatures this morning as warm as 38 up there. Not a lot of wind really in most spots. This is the Central Oregon coast looking to the north. Lincoln County, that's the camera in at Otter Crest. We have clouds over downtown Portland. We're setting at 50. Certainly comfortable to be out and about. The east winds are still gusting at times out near the Gorge, Trout Tails Airport to about 30, 35. You get away from there, winds are pretty light. We'll be 54 at most, it looks like, for high, as a little bit of rain here and there continues all the way into your evening. Christine?
Okay, thank you, Rod. And we've got a quick traffic alert to tell you about. Starting tonight at 11 p.m., both northbound and southbound lanes on Oregon Highway 217 will be closed. This is happening between Greenberg Road and OR 99W near Tigard. Several on-ramps leading up to this area will also close. This is all part of a multi-year project on 217 to add an auxiliary lane. It's now in its second year. Crews plan to reopen the highway by 5 a.m. Friday.